I love Halloween as much as the next guy, but isn't this just a little ridiculous? I asked my wife as we drove through the town square. It was not even September yet, and the whole block had been adorned in spider webs, purple and orange lights, all sorts of inflatable monster and ghoul decorations. Witches and zombies were prowling the square as well, or at least humans dressed up as witches and zombies. They were joined by horror movie villains and various macabre characters. What are these guys dressed up like this for? Halloween is almost 2 full months away. Leah shrugged. Yeah, it is a little odd here. I don't know. I kinda like it. It's festive. Yeah, I guess you have a good point. I agreed. I'm sure Mason will enjoy it anyway. I was right. Wow, this is so cool. His eyes lit up as we passed the town square for the second time after we had picked him up from school. I like this place already. Told you. Leah smiled as she gripped my hand. The next few weeks continued, and the Halloween ambience was amplified even more. By this point, half of town was dressed up in costume. As if it was the 31st. I mean, I'm used to seeing waiters and cashiers wearing some flair on the day of Halloween, maybe passing out some candy, but this was something else. It was only September 24th when I was getting checked out by someone wearing a complete Pennywise costume. The level of authenticity was unsettling, to say the least. The ghostly white face with red accents on the cheeks and nose, the full-sized clown costume, the demonic yellow eyes, even the height. It looked like Bill Skarsgård was staring down at me. He eyed me up once or twice before clicking his tongue and shaking his head. You really ought to be more festive. He chuckled as he handed me my bag of groceries with one hand and offered me a red balloon with the other. I quickly grabbed my groceries, ignoring the balloon, and speed walked to my car, definitely more than a little creeped out. I called Leah and told her the story. So, Pennywise just checked me out at the grocery store. I laughed. He looked at me like I was the strange one for not being in a stage-ready costume over a month before Halloween. She just paused on the line for a little too long before responding with a soft chuckle. I guess this town just really loves Halloween. Maybe we should get costumes too. That night I rifled through my closet. I had exactly 2 items that could be considered costumes. Some plastic cat ears and a black cloak with some red clouds on it. The Akatsuki costume from Naruto if I was feeling more festive, and the cat ears if I just needed to throw something on before taking Mason trick-or-treating. When October first hit, things became different. Now, almost everyone in town was in costume, whether walking the streets, at the store, at work, everywhere. These costumes weren't just tacky cat ears either. I saw Jack Skellington, perfectly dressed in his cartoon-esque suit. He was walking his dog, which was covered with a lion's mane. I assumed it was supposed to be Mufasa. When I sat down at work, I almost shrieked as I looked to my right, where my co-worker, Steve, usually sits. I saw Freddy Krueger grinning at me with rotten teeth framed by his horrible melted face. The level of detail on this disgusting mask gave me chills. Instead of speaking in his usual, nasally, not threatening at all voice, he remained silent and just waved at me with his razor-bladed gloves. I promise you, those blades were not plastic. I just ignored him and put my head down to get my work done. I would occasionally see various people in my office as they walked past my desk. Many paused, flashing looks of confusion and disapproval as they noticed my outfit of slacks and a plaid button-up shirt. Around an hour after my lunch break, I looked up to see my manager at my desk. The only way I could tell it was her voice. Her skin was painted bright green, and her nose was now twice as long, curving downwards. Her black dress grazed the ground as I followed her into the meeting room. "Hey, Otis." She started slowly. "Hello. I didn't think we were doing our one-on-ones this week." "No. Well, I just wanted to talk. I think you're doing a great job at work, so it's not about that." I nodded, waiting for her to continue her thought. "It's just... well, look, I know you're new here. Some of us just noticed that you haven't been dressing up in a costume for the last few weeks. Around here, we like to start wearing our Halloween costumes for a few weeks leading up to the holiday. Do you by chance have a costume at home? You have my permission to head home and change." I don't know if I have anything too extravagant. I mean, nothing like what I've seen here at the office." She continued pushing the subject. "Well, that's fine too. I'm sure we have something here you could wear." She got up and opened the closet door in the office, revealing at least 10 full costumes. "We have lots of outfits here. How about this?" After rummaging through the items, she pulled out a black cape and a Darth Vader mask from out of the closet. I was so confused I forgot to say anything. Why the hell is wearing a costume so important here? I think she misread my confusion for disliking the Vader outfit. Oh, I know." She reached further into the closet and grabbed a large purple peacoat and tuxedo combination. "What about Willy Wonka?" she exclaimed excitedly. By this point, I was getting frustrated. I had no idea why I needed to walk around in a costume a goddamn month before Halloween. "Hey, Sheila," I finally spoke up in an attempt to get out of this situation. "I'm actually not feeling so well. Do you mind if I go home and get some rest?" The Wicked Witch of the West put the Wonka costume back and stared at me for what felt like minutes before finally responding. "I suggest you pick one of these." Her tone sounded conversational enough, but I could hear a steady, intimidating undercurrent emanating from the words. I was getting fed up. "No," I responded in a firm voice, just enough to not be yelling. "I guess I'll have to choose one for you, Otis." She smiled, with yellow, rotting teeth. Before I could get up, she bolted at me with the purple peacoat. "Wear it!" she screeched, attempting to throw the coat over my shoulders. I stumbled out of my seat and quickly pushed her away, immediately bolting for the door. She didn't follow me, but I heard her call as I ran back to my desk to grab my things and get out of there. "You really ought to be more festive, Otis." All throughout the office, people were dressed to the nines in every costume I could think of. Ghostface, Rick Sanchez, the Easter Bunny, 11 from Stranger Things, complete with the buzzcut and slight nosebleed. Honestly, I felt that these people looked so ridiculous, fully dressed up as if we were having a costume contest. But it was me who was the odd one out. Everyone's eyes seemed to follow me as I speed walked out of the building. Whispers and hushed voices seemed to come from everyone I saw, just to get snuffed out as they noticed I was looking at them. I was well past creeped out by this point. I began running to my car and sped home as fast as I could. The town square was even more decorated than before. Not just Halloween store inflatable decor anymore. The square looked like the set of Halloween Town. A giant orange jack-o'-lantern grinned at me, surrounded by several decrepit buildings. I was in awe at both how realistic everything looked and how fast they were able to put it all together. As I drove, not one single person was out of costume. Everyone stared at me as I passed through. I was beginning to get more terrified. I stopped at a red light just to turn and see Valak from the Nun peering over from the car next to me. Her beady yellow eyes staring right through me. I screamed and sped through the light, nearly getting T-boned by an oncoming car in the process. Trying not to alarm him, I waited until after we put Mason to bed to have the conversation with my wife. "Leah, I was attacked at work today," I started. She put her book down and looked over at me. "What? By who?" For some reason, my boss really wanted me to wear a Halloween costume today at work. She even had a closet full of them for me to choose from. She jumped at me and almost forced me to put one on. Damn, that is really weird. Have you reached out to HR yet? I definitely think you should give them a call. Oh, and you should not have to go back there. We talked over which groups to get involved and the steps needed to file a formal complaint before turning in for the night. Over the next few weeks, the Halloween fervor ramped up more and more. I was getting more creeped out by this whole thing. Everywhere I looked, all I could see were gravestones, large cobwebs and hanging scarecrows. Every neighbor on my street seemed to get the memo and began to decorate their house with more spooky pieces with each passing day. Just like the town square, the decor rivaled the quality of a horror movie set. One day, I saw Leah walking home with several large shopping bags. I was fed up. "Oh, don't tell me we're getting some Halloween decorations too, Leah," I yelled. She pleaded. "Don't you want to fit in here? We've been here for nearly a month and already have a bad reputation. You're embarrassing this family by sticking out so much. Can't we just be more festive?" Why is everyone so fucking obsessed with Halloween here? I don't know. Could we at least try to fit in? Mason tells me he's having trouble making friends at school. Everyone is calling him the guy with the weird dad. Her hands moved to make air quotes at her last words. That made me pause. They're really saying that? Yes. I knew Mason was having issues at school, with being a new student and all that, but I didn't realize I was such a contributing factor. Damn it. Fine. Let's decorate the house, but I'm not going to start wearing a costume. I don't know what it was about putting on a Halloween costume that had me so on edge. I had done it so many times before over the years, but this time just felt different. The looks and whispers, my pushy boss. It just seemed like everyone in the whole town had their eye on me, watching the one family that just wouldn't comply with their creepy Halloween dress code. Well, pretty soon, it became just me who wouldn't comply. After calling HR and letting them know about what my boss did, I was granted temporary paid leave while they went through an internal harassment investigation. I'm a little embarrassed to say it, but I even had Leah take care of all the chores that would have required me to leave the house. I was just too creeped out by the scary imagery I would see everywhere. My plan was to wait until Halloween, with the hope that my town would finally return to some resemblance of normality afterwards. Well, Halloween finally arrived, the day I was both dreading and anxiously awaiting. I instructed Leah to take Mason trick-or-treating that night, while I stayed at home and handed out candy. The second they left, I was planning to leave a bowl out and hide in my room watching Christmas movies. I didn't even see what costumes they were wearing as they left the house. After around an hour into Home Alone 2, I heard 3 loud knocks at the door. Someone must have been outside. "Trick or treat." I heard several kid voices singing from outside. I figured that someone must have taken more than a few pieces of candy, leaving my bowl empty. "Hang on 1 second," I shouted as I went to grab a bag of candy from the pantry. My stomach dropped as I swung open my door. Sheila, my boss, stood there. Alongside her, Steve and a few other co-workers stood in various over-the-top costumes. Slightly behind them, Mason and Leah. Mason had his hair up and a full costume like Dash from The Incredibles. My wife was Mrs. Incredible. Before I even knew what was happening, they all filed into the house. "Hi, honey." Leah smiled through her eye mask. "We are going to need you to put on a costume and come out with us." I was in shock. What was Sheila doing here? She should have been arrested after attacking me. "What are you doing with her?" I yelled with anger and confusion. I felt so betrayed to see my own wife and child next to those bastards from work. "Daddy, please, you need to put on a costume," Mason pleaded. "They're right," Sheila said with a horrible grin. She had tattered clothes and grey skin. The deep gashes on her body and face looked so real. I could almost smell their rot wafting into my nose. Before I could respond, 3 of my co-workers rushed towards me and grabbed my hands. I growled and fought, but their combined strength was too much. I felt so deeply betrayed as Leah held the mask up. It was a plague doctor mask, with a long beak and 2 black circles for eyes. As she placed it over my head and tightened it, I noticed how durable it felt. The mask was made with leather and steel, not plastic or foam. I cringed and struggled as she placed it around my head and tightened it around the back of my head. The moment I had the mask placed over me, I heard a loud crack and deep rumble in the earth. The rumbling that ensued was like that of a strong earthquake, though it ended just as soon as it began. Leah whispered urgently to me, "Otis, put this on now," as she held out several pieces of costume. For some reason, I decided to trust my wife and listen. I grabbed the heavy Victorian era coat, top hat, and cane to complete the plague doctor costume. "What the hell?" I started, before Mason interrupted me with a, "Shh, Dad, he's almost here." The first thing I saw coming down our street was 2 bony stallions, both of them black as night, with phosphorescent white eyes. On their backs, folded sets of grey veiny wings. As they walked forwards, I saw they were both harnessed to a large black chariot with 2 black shapes inside. The door creaked open as one of them stepped down from the chariot. I looked around to notice everyone. My boss and co-workers, Leah, and even Mason were all sitting on the floor of the entryway. It seemed like they were aiming to be as still as possible. I immediately joined them as I looked to see who had gotten out of the chariot. I could feel the dark presence all the way from my house. Its aura felt suffocating, almost like the feeling of being unable to breathe in on a humid summer day. The lights in my house all flickered at each earth-shaking step he took towards us, until they finally went out as he stepped into the doorway. I was finally able to get a better look at who this was. The first thing I noticed was 2 large horns towering past its skull. They were so large that he was unable to fit through the door. The creature had a skeletal head with glowing red eyes. The body was covered with a large cloak that stuck out at several odd places, hiding its true form. This costume was like nothing I had ever seen before, until I came to the realization that it wasn't a costume at all. I quickly averted my gaze as I noticed it was staring at me, slowly observing me. The eyes wandered around the room, looking at everyone up and down for an agonizing moment. I gasped as it bent forward into my house and slowly touched my mask, lightly squeezing it between what I assumed was its thumb and forefinger. Its hand was ashy and wrinkled, as if it had been roasted in fire for a week straight. It nodded and slowly walked out of the house. It paused several times, seemingly fixated on a jack-o'-lantern or some spiderweb decorations. No one in my house could hold their gasps when they saw what happened next. Somehow, a child no older than 10 wandered into our view. He was dressed up like a Na'vi alien from Avatar. The paint looked cheap and the costume was rather poorly put together. We saw the creature slowly reach out and place a finger on the kid's arm, rubbing it up and down, before taking a look at his hand. Before anyone could even take another breath, the creature's disgusting hand snapped forward, grabbing the kid by the throat. I closed my eyes as I heard a mix of screams from the kid and sounds I could not recognize blend together in the night air. I didn't open them again until long after I heard the chariot leave our street. Many days have passed since the night of Halloween. Just like I predicted, as November 1st hit, the Halloween mania was gone. No one dressed in costume anymore, and decorations were quickly removed from the houses and public buildings. However, the shock from that night never quite wore off. I still shudder when I think about that creature, how quickly and violently that boy was attacked, all because his costume wasn't realistic enough. If Sheila and my wife were just a minute slower to get me my own costume, I'm certain I wouldn't be here today. The following year, a new family moved next door to us. I could tell they were just as confused as I was at the scale of Halloween decor and costumes, so long before the holiday. I saw their eyebrows raise as I went over to greet them with a full suit of medieval armor. I pulled off the lumbering steel helmet. "Hey there," I waved. "I'm Otis from down the street. Just so you know, we take Halloween very seriously around here. You guys ought to be more festive." "Oh, why's that?" the dad asked with an amused chuckle. "Well, there's a demon that appears from hell every Halloween to take you away if your costume isn't good enough." Hello, sinister listeners. If you've enjoyed this story, then you'll find all the author's information in the description below. For more content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to succumb to the sinister.